Today, I'm going to be showing you step by step the polygraph process. Welcome to Inside the Polygraph. I'm your host, David Goldberg, expert polygraph examiner. Join me as I and my guests break down the facts, fictions of polygraph testing, law enforcement, and so much more. Real cases, real conversations. The truth is always revealed inside the polygraph. First, you would be sitting out in a lobby waiting to be called back to the polygraph testing site with your examiner. Here is an empty chair, but let's just say you, the listener, is here to take a polygraph test. So you today is and will be the examinee. So follow me if you're ready. Come on. I would come into this conference room, and please note too, ladies and gentlemen, that not every polygraph office or building or polygraph suite, as sometimes they're called, is set up the exact same way that you are going to view on today's episode. But just take in consideration that just because it's not set up, this is the proper procedures how one would take a polygraph examination. We would then enter. I would then have the individual who's taken the test, which is you, or the applicant, or what we would call the examinee, have a seat, and then I would have a seat as the examiner in a chair. At which time, I would then introduce myself to the individual and say, hello, my name is David Goldberg. I will be your examiner for today's polygraph testing. When the individual comes to take a test, whether it's for an applicant, criminal matter, allegation, or anything that someone is here for taking a polygraph test, obviously the individual is going to identify themselves with proper identification so that we know they're here to take the polygraph test and they're not in someone else's position. At that point, I'm then going to show this individual who I am with my credentials, and here is my credentials. And then at that point, I am going to present a load of paperwork for this individual, such as waivers, an agreement to take a polygraph examination. And then at that point, ladies and gentlemen, I'm then going to explain, after all documentation's filled out, exactly how the polygraph examination will be conducted. And I'll go over this again with the individual, but in this space, I would tell the examinee, the subject who's taken the test, or since you're filling in that position, I will tell you how this test will be conducted. First, again, after all paperwork and documentation is signed and explained in depth, I would then say the following. And again, remember, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're here for an application procedure, whether it's a criminal matter, infidelity, or a specific allegation against you, it is all the same, except for there may be another party involved that the examiner, myself, may have to interview prior to interviewing the examinee. But for this issue today, we're just going to say, I don't have anyone else that I'm going to interview. I'm just going to be interviewing and testing the subject, the examinee. So I would then tell the examinee exactly how the procedure would go. I would say, I'm going to interview him or her in length prior to testing in reference to all the issues that need to be covered. That means if you're here for the pre-employment application process, we're going to go through your packet that you filled out prior, and we're going to go through all those questions. And then after we go through all those questions, as an examiner, I have more questions that I'm going to ask you and cover. And then after the interview, I'm then going to then formulate questions, review those questions with you before any testing is given, and then I'm going to then test you. If it's not a pre-employment application, and let's say it's a criminal allegation, child sexual abuse, allegation of physical abuse to a child, domestic violence, whatever, then what I would then say is I'm going to interview you in length in reference to your allegation that's being made against you to get your side of the story and the allegations that are being made against you. Then I'm going to then formulate the questions, review those questions, and test you and verify that your answers are absolutely true. After I explain all that to the subject, the examinee, or the applicant, I'm then going to turn and I'm going to say, do you have any further questions in reference to what I've just gone over? If they say yes, I would ask, what do you have? And I will be fully transparent and answer anything that they have. Afterwards, if they have none or they have no more questions, I'll then ask them if they need to use the restroom or would they like something to drink. Water, obviously. If they say yes, I'll then go and show them where the restroom is and or get them something to drink for hydration purposes. If they have no request for a restroom and or a drink, I'll say, are you ready? And if they say yes, I'll say, all right, let's go. And then I will gather all the documentation, all the pens and paperwork, and I'll say, come follow me. So you ready? Come follow me. Now we'll proceed into the actual polygraph examination room where all the testing will begin. When we enter the room, I'm going to tell the individual that's going to be tested today to empty out all their pockets. That means nothing in their pockets, and they're going to take everything out, including a phone, and they're going to turn the phone off or place it on airplane mode, just so that there's no interruption in this examination. I'm going to have them take off any watch they have because they may have a smartphone watch that vibrates or buzzes. And again, it is only because I don't want any interruption to the examination. So they'll take everything out. They will then put it on a desk or a table that may be in the examination room. And then I'll have them have a seat in the polygraph chair. Once the examinee is settled down in the polygraph chair, I will then proceed to where I will be sitting.
Have you been accused of one of the following in your life, such as infidelity, custody matters, CPS investigations, or serious criminal matters that you're currently being investigated for? At Executive Protection Group Polygraph Service, we have been helping thousands of individuals for over 24 years, no matter who you are or what you have been accused of, with the highest accuracy, integrity, and overall compassion to everyone's needs. We are not your typical polygraph or lie detection service. At Executive Protection Group Polygraph Service, we are certified experts recognized in courts throughout the country, and we stand by our promise to give you full closure and all your needed answers. Call at 757-495-1301 and visit our website at www.executiveprotectiongrp.com to get started.
So I've just sat down, and so where the procedure will begin from there is I'm now going to ask some basic questions just to make sure that the examinee is suitable for testing. That means I'm going to ask some basic questions, just simple, basic questions to ensure that the individual taking the test is able to take the test. One, I'm going to ask their name, going to ask how much sleep they've had, did they have anything to eat this morning, or at least this afternoon if it's an afternoon test, or did they have dinner or something to eat last night, how much sleep they had within the last 24 hours, are they taking any type of prescription medication, and what for, and have they used any illicit, illegal drugs or narcotics, and any kind of serious medical or mental conditions that I need to know as an examiner to ensure that they are cognitively fully aware of questions that will be asked of them. As an examiner, ladies and gentlemen, it is fully up to me to make sure that the individual taking the test is suitable, which means if someone comes in to this office and says that they've had absolutely no sleep whatsoever and they're exhausted or they've worked all night long, ladies and gentlemen, that's not fair to that examinee who's going to take the test, because they are not going to be fully alert. They haven't had anything to eat energy-wise. They're probably dehydrated. They're exhausted. That's not fair to them. And if the examiner does test them, and should they fail, that's not fair that they fail when, if they would have had proper sleep, maybe gotten some food into their system, they may have done a lot better. So if an examiner doesn't ask those proper questions, shame on that examiner, because really that examiner doesn't care about the individual taking the test. After those basic questions are gone over and the examiner then says, yep, you are absolutely good and you're suitable for testing, the examiner then will begin what's called the pre-test interview phase. That's where the examiner will go over what they are there for to be tested. Whether, again, it's for pre-employment, they've applied for law enforcement, they've applied for being a firefighter, they've applied for being a special agent, they've applied for corrections, EMT, 911 dispatcher, whatever they've applied for, corrections or deputy sheriff, or whether or not they're there for an infidelity test or a specific allegation that CPS may be investigating, whatever the matter is, that examiner is now going to interview them in reference to that specific issue that needs to be resolved. When that examiner interviews them, and they interview them in length, the examiner should be taking copious notes and ask very, very poignant questions to verify, one, truthfulness, get details, and then after all questions are asked and answered, the examiner will then formulate questions on their computer, which is next to me. And then afterwards, ladies and gentlemen, they will then formulate those questions and review those questions with the individual that's going to take the test. And the reason why, ladies and gentlemen, is because no surprise questions should ever be asked of the individual taking. None. This is not a surprise test. You're not supposed to be surprised, and the questions should be reviewed with you prior to ever taking a test. After the review of the questions are given to you, you are then going to be attached to instrumentation. That means that you're going to have a tube on your chest, a tube on your stomach, a blood pressure cuff, and some electrodes on your fingers. And so, ladies and gentlemen, after the review of those questions, and the examinee, which is what they're called, or the applicant, is fully aware of all those questions, they have no concerns and they have no issues in reference to the questions that were reviewed with them, the attachments are then placed on the individual's body. And let me show you what attachments will be placed on that individual. You have a breathing tube, which is called a pneumotube, on that person's chest, which would go right here. Then you have another one, ladies and gentlemen, that goes on your stomach, which is for the diaphragm. Then you have some attachments that would go on your fingers, and another one that would go on your fingers. And then you have a blood pressure cuff. Those are the attachments that are placed on the individual, and those will be the attachments that will be monitoring your physiology when you are being tested. After you are attached to those instrumentations, you will then be giving the polygraph test with the questions that were reviewed with you. Again, no surprise questions. The questions that were reviewed with you will be administered to you. After those testings, then after all tests are administered, the examiner will review the charts, score those charts, and then the examiner will get them, and should get them, quality controlled to ensure that they did proper analysis, and then you should be given the results. Now, there's a lot of agencies that don't give you the results there because they'll tell you that they have to give them quality controlled and that you'll be notified at a later date. And that may be the policy of those agencies, and that's nothing that can be changed. However, if you go somewhere else that the agency will tell you right then and there, you should have the results immediately that day. The test, ladies and gentlemen, can take anywhere, and should take anywhere, from an hour and a half up to sometimes 5 hours, depending on the examination you take and the agency or the private examiner that you go to. If your examination takes any less than an hour and a half from start to finish, you are being given a poor examination and doing injustice to you, and you should really, really worry about the results that you're given if you're told you fail with an examination under an hour and a half. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, because the American Polygraph Association and all state associations, licensing, and boards say a minimum of an hour and a half for polygraph examinations must be administered to an individual. So if you get a 10-minute test, 30-minute test, or less, or a 45-minute test, there's something drastically wrong with, one, the examiner, and two, the results that probably are coming out of that test. After everything is completed, the analysis is done, and you're given the results, your test is over, and the attachments are then taken off you. You're then given a final waiver to sign, and then you're then asked if there's any further questions, and then out the door you are probably escorted, and hopefully you're treated very, very respectfully and very well, and then the rest of the day is yours. I will also tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, a professional polygraph examiner is supposed to ease your anxiety, calm your nerves, and ensure that you do very well on your polygraph examination testing. And if they don't, and they act like an ass, or they're a narcissist themselves, or they want to play bad cop or good cop or whatever, then that too is something you should be concerned with. Because there's no reason for an examiner to be that way unless they're burnt out, they don't give a crap about you, and they don't even want to be there. They're just being forced to do their job, and they're just tired of it. An examiner that cares, an examiner that wants to see you pass if you're telling the truth, should ease your anxiety, and you're not going to fail it for those reasons. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please like, subscribe, and comment. And if you're about to take a polygraph test, I wish you the very best. If you need me, you know how to reach me, and I will be there for you. You have an excellent and wonderful day.
Thanks so much for listening. If you truly liked what you heard today, please be sure to rate the show, share with others, and subscribe for more episodes.